Today we're going to have a first look at the recently released P3D version 5. Some recent reviews on YouTube have focused on the vanilla software with no add-ons and have concluded that the sim has poorly detailed aircraft, unrealistic scenery and rather flaky weather. To some extent this is true. In fact, for all versions of P3D and for FSX. However, very few people use P3D in its vanilla state. They purchase better aircraft, scenery, weather, and tool add-ons that completely transform the sim. Here you can see the Milviz HUI and the Aerosoft Gibralter scenery, and you can see they look pretty good. There are no dedicated installers at the moment for P3Dv5, so you have to do a little bit of tweaking in order to get V4 aircraft and scenery installed into V5. For the Gibraltar scenery, you have to load it into V4 initially. It does load externally, not within the sim, and then you have to manipulate the add-ons config file, which is located in the program data area of usually your C drive. The HUI can be loaded into V4 and then physically cut and pasted into V5, and it works fine. Here you can see a halo effect around the chopper in comparison to the backdrop, and clearly there's something that needs a bit of tweaking there. For most people, their critical software will be their scenery software, mostly by ORBX, and there are some instructions for transferring your legacy ORBX products into V5. The order that scenery gets put in the scenery library is always a bit confusing. So here's some words of guidance from Lorby, and there's also a list, a priority order list here that gives you an idea of how things should be structured in your scenery library. The 2D photorealistic scenery here looks a bit unrealistic, to say the least, so it needs a bit of enhancement, 3D enhancement, using Sim Director to add some three-dimensional buildings to the top here. You can see here that the sim is amazingly smooth, despite the amount of detail that's around. And I'm getting consistently about 50 to 60 frames per second, which is quite acceptable. I'll show you my system specs and the P3Dv5 settings a little later on in the video. In the background, this scenery has been enhanced with ORBX's global base pack and with the Open Land class Europe. It looks okay here, but there are some issues, and they'll become more obvious in the next segment that we look at. So here we are at ORBX's Goodwood airfield, and this scenery has been enhanced with ORBX global high definition trees, global high definition buildings, True Earth Great Britain South, and the EU England region. The Spitfires and Hurricanes, you can see, are AI traffic aircraft. The Bostons are static aircraft that have been placed there. And the trees that you see in the near foreground are all placed items through Instance Scenery 3. Notice that the vegetation stops for a while, for about 2 or 3 square miles around the airfield. Then in the far distance you can see the vegetation picking up again, which is kind of unusual. There's obviously a glitch there that needs to be sorted out. You can also see that there's very little in the way of auto-generated buildings in the near distance, just 1 or 2 big obvious things a few miles away. But there's this sort of blank area around the airfield. Very strange. Here we can see exactly the same scenery, but in P3D version 4. And you'll notice there's quite a big difference in terms of detail. Much more detail here. The weather is also considerably different, but that was mainly down to V4 having one of the Rex weather packages turned on at the time. The frame rate's a bit lower in V4. It doesn't have the smoothness of V5. It's not that noticeable. Back to version 5. We see that some of the ground objects have a bit more contrast. They stand out a bit more. And we've also got that strange no man's land just outside the airfield. But very smooth. Frame rates around about 50 frames per second. So here's the system specs, and then the settings I was using in P3D version 5 are as follows. So I think the key things to note about the new simulator are that your legacy products, aircraft and scenery, do work in the new version, but there are 1 or 2 issues that still need to be ironed out, but they're not showstoppers. The new sim is a lot faster, smoother, and I think it's going to be a great addition to the flight simulator community. Hope you like that. Please subscribe and see you next time.